Welcome to Green Building Matters, the original and most popular podcast focused on the green building movement. Your host is Charlie Cicchetti, one of the most credentialed experts in the green building industry and one of the few to be honored as a LEED Fellow. Each week, Charlie welcomes a green building professional from around the globe to share their war stories, career advice, and unique insight into how sustainability is shaping the built environment. So settle in, grab a fresh cup of coffee, and get ready to find out why green building matters.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the next episode of the Green Building Matters podcast. I love doing this. Once a week, I get to interview a green building professional somewhere in the world. But today, we've got Jeff Ross-Bain with us, and he's here in Atlanta, where I'm based. And I can't wait to learn more about his origin story, learn more about Ross-Bain Green Building, his company, and just see what's next. So, Jeff, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, Charlie. Thank you.
Well, I know we've crossed paths a lot here in the Atlanta green building community, and it's just going to be special to learn a little more about you. And with all of our podcast guests, I like to say, hey, take us back. So where'd you grow up and where'd you go to school?
Okay. Well, my origin story is probably a little different than most. I have the little spiel. My mother's French, my father's English. They met in Spain. They were married in Canada. My two sisters were born in London, and I was born in Sydney, Australia.
Globetrotting. That's amazing.
Yeah,
wow, no kidding.
And shortly after I was born, my parents drove across Australia from Sydney to Perth.
Okay.
And then I went on we went on the Queen Mary through the Panama Canal and to Europe to visit the family there, and then came to the United States on a ship into New York Harbor. And I did all of that before I was 3 years old.
Whoa, man, that's great. I've had over 200 podcast guests, and you're the first to have done that. So that's pretty cool. And wow, I mean, well, gosh, that might lead to some early influences. But if you came to the States when you were pretty young, I guess, did you end up in Georgia or where did the family land?
Well, we did travel. The first place we went, again, was across the country to San Francisco.
Okay.
And from there, we went to Texas. And my father, he was also an engineer.
Okay.
And he was in Texas, is actually working on NASA when they were building NASA.
Oh, wow. That's great.
And then came to South Carolina and then eventually Atlanta. So after all that traveling, here we are, ended up in the Southeast. And I've been in Atlanta, pretty much since the third grade, although I've done some traveling myself.
Sure. Wow. That's a really cool origin story and the ships and those other countries. And I guess, tell us about, maybe knowing where to go to school, right? You've actually got a couple degrees with a couple of great Atlanta engineering schools. So tell us about Southern Poly and what made you want to get into mechanical engineering.
Yeah. Well, I think, you kind of become a mechanical engineer, I think. And so, I realized that when I looked in some other areas, like picking a career, and then I kind of found that, the physics of things, seemed to appeal to me. And then once my dad actually got me a job working as a blueprint boy, back when they made blueprints. And from there, I started going to school in Southern Tech at the time, allowed you to have, like night schools. And I did that. So then eventually I went full time and got my degree in mechanical engineering.
Fantastic.
And then started, doing some commercial HVAC design is pretty much what I've always done, with a few departures. Because in the late 80s, I actually went back to Australia because where I was born, and stayed there for a year and ended up driving the entire perimeter of the country. Wow. And then came back to England. And once in England, I worked on the Channel Tunnel project, which was the big tunnel that goes between England and France. And we were on the commissioning team for that. And then, so I come back from Europe in the 90s, and then kind of, from the Channel Tunnel project to going back to commercial and energy, commercial HVAC design. it was still interesting, but wasn't quite the same. And then jumping ahead a little bit here, but in the late 90s, I started seeing this word called LEED popping up in the literature. Sure. And that made me quite interested. And I found that was something that I can really be drawn to. So I actually quit my job and went and worked for 4 years at Southface here in Atlanta. If you've heard of Southface, I'm sure it's a non-energy efficiency, sustainable nonprofit here. And so that was my cutting my teeth in being able to learn not only the LEED rating system, but I do lots of energy modeling and energy efficiency studies. And now we've been doing commissioning for a long time too. And then I worked for an architecture firm as their sustainability person. And then 14 years ago, decided to start my own firm, and we're still here.
Man, I love this story. And and just, you kind of retrace some of your roots there, right? Australia and then back up to Europe and then the tunnel.
Absolutely.
So before we jump to LEED, and gosh, what a better place than Southface to really learn those early days of LEED. In the 90s, though, with some of your engineering work, was there any energy efficiency, or was it really just more design work in the commissioning? Let's make sure this is running the right way. Maybe not even yet the most energy efficient way. So just give us a quick peek into the 90s. Was there any energy efficiency there?
You know, what I wish I had have kept, but I didn't, was the original version of ASHRAE 90.1.
Oh, wow.
It's only available in in a PDF now. But, but it was a completely different animal back then. And it was still being formulated. It looks nothing like it does today. And there were hints of that coming forward, because what had happened was the states had adopted the energy code. The problem is nobody really knew how to implement it. Sure. And there was not really a big push towards energy efficiency. I remember the air conditioning manufacturer to come out with some systems that they were beginning to have variable frequency drives, maybe a little bit before then, and so that was something that you were beginning to see. That it was, I would say that for my world, the energy efficiency prior to the 90s was probably more on, you can save a lot of money on your air conditioning system. Okay,
Jeff. So, LEED out in the year 2000, you're at Southface, later going architecture in Atlanta. So tell us about the 2000s there in your green building work.
Yeah, I think the 2000s were probably personally my most formative years as far as gaining knowledge of sustainability and energy efficiency and LEED and that whole world. And also being able to understand what's happening in the world. And I think my 4 years at Southface was pretty much like 4 years in college, because being a nonprofit, you're allowed to sort of do your own thing in many ways. And I dove into these issues full steam, and I got the chance to really study energy modeling, make lots of mistakes, and studied LEED, and we all thought we knew everything at the time, and was, worked on some of the first LEED projects here in Atlanta. And it was all kind of happening. And then at some point, there's an ending, I guess, to everything. And my friend at the architecture firm here in town wanted to start adopting, sustainability measures within their practice. So I became their sustainability director, I guess. And one of the great achievements from there was we did the World of Coca-Cola Museum. Yeah. That was one of our projects, a LEED Gold project. Very interesting energy story there, but we don't need to get into that.
I bet.
But and then finally, after another spell, I just decided that I kind of like to call my own shots and go out and do my own work. So I went ahead and formed Ross-Bain Green Building in 2009, January 1, 2009. And since then, have done probably well over 100 LEED projects, energy audits, and energy models, LEED platinum, certified silver, gold, and platinum buildings. And really, 100% of what I do is related to sustainable, high-performance green buildings.
I love it. Yeah, I started my first business in May 2009. So, hey, why not? Green buildings are here to stay. There's a recession set in, and let's go. You did. I did. I love it. Still looking back a little bit, did you have any mentors or anyone you looked up to along the way that had some influence?
Looking back even further, one of the things that I feel is helpful is I love to read, and I've always kind of explored, things in a way. And when I was thinking of that, I realized I don't think there's only one individual that stands out, because there's been so many influences and there's so many people out there that have provided such important guidance and information. Just for example, I sit on a ASHRAE committee and have done in the past. And just those folks, the knowledge that you're surrounded with just in those situations is invaluable.
Yeah. I've heard that from others I've interviewed, that sometimes it's just the peers together, because we were figuring this out together, so early. And so I've heard that was kind of the kind of community mentorship almost. Right. Well, you said you like to read. I mean, there was probably some things you had to go out and learn along the way, of course, and then that training at Southface. And then later, I guess you went to Georgia Tech and got an advanced degree. So it made you want to do that.
Well, I tell you what, when you do energy audits of buildings, you tend to go into a building and you kind of look at its condition and you look at its past history of energy use, and you sort of decide, what does this building need to, number one, improve its energy efficiency, and and number two, as far as capital purchasing of the equipment, when it's age and everything. And I ended up doing a energy audit of a multiple building campus, and as I was going through all of the building after building after building, I realized that all of the problems here are the same in all of these buildings. And then it dawned on me that buying all new equipment and supplying this whole campus with new fancy equipment is not really fixing the problem. I think, and that's where it dawned on me, or the penny dropped, what have you, that operations and maintenance and ongoing performance evaluation and checking of buildings is key to having a building truly perform as it's intended. So luckily, I'm a 6-minute bike ride from Georgia Tech, and I did a little research and found out that they actually have a graduate school courses in facility management. You can get a PhD in facility management today. And I have a master's now in facility management. And it wasn't so much that I wanted to be a facility manager, but it opened up, it completely changed how I see facility management taking place. It's actually a very professional, involved, multi-skill endeavor, is to be able to correctly and efficiently operate a building in today's world. And you have to have lots of skill sets. So one of the things I'm working towards is that's also changed my commissioning scope slightly, in the sense that now when I look at a commissioning for a building, but most of what I'm thinking about is, how is this building going to be operated? How is it going to function? And what can we do to make sure that whoever is doing that has proper documentation in place to be able to do that? So that was a little bit of a change for me, but I loved going back to school. It was like getting all current with everything again.
I've heard great things about that program at Georgia Tech, and that's my alma mater, so it's close to my heart, and I love it, man.
I'm actually teaching. I'm actually an adjunct professor there now.
It's amazing. And I know Georgia Tech teaches a lot of great courses and some theory, and your time at Southern, even more hands-on, and that's what we find between those two good schools here in Atlanta. Okay, so one more look back, and then we'll get back to present day. But just, looking back, what are you really proud of on your green building career, and personally, looking back?
Again, I would say with probably on a grand scale, I think shifting from mechanical design engineer to green building consultant was a big shift, because it involved at the start a complete lifestyle change, to bring that on. And I think as far as projects go, I've had some pretty interesting projects with like the World of Coca-Cola was a great project. A lot of reason the World of Coca-Cola was so great is because the owner is really dedicated to doing the sustainability part rather than just the plaque, so that was encouraging. And I've done a wide array of LEED projects. We had the Trees Atlanta headquarters was our first LEED Platinum project. And that was great because of the doing some of the daylight studies for that. I enjoyed that. But as far as like main personal achievements, again, it's almost like the mentors. I don't have one that stands out, particularly. So I'm not really, I think one achievement, I guess I could say is, I think that I'm pretty passionate about what I do. And I think that shows through with clients and at meetings and things like that. And I think that's an attribute that is helpful. Sure. Is to have, and I feel that's an achievement.
It is, absolutely. And just the resilience and being an entrepreneur, growing your business and LEED fellow and so many more things we could add. Yeah. Take us to present day. So tell us a little more of kind of what's keeping you busy today.
Well, I'm to the point now where I'm just about at my limit of bandwidth for a small firm.
Sure.
I could sure use some help, but it's very difficult to find people who know how to do this. Yeah. And but I have some interesting projects. One just starting is a pharmaceutical company where they're LEED, and it's an European firm. And I'm doing the energy model and the LEED part of it, and it's going to be a challenging energy model with all those systems and stuff that go into pharmaceutical labs and clean rooms and fume hoods and things like that. Also have an interesting project in Savannah, two multifamily side by side that are using cross-laminated timber construction. And it's these big, massive Lego pieces. They're all FSC wood, but they're from Europe. So we don't get the location credit, but we get the FSC. And it's a 6-story structure, all wood. And it's going to be beautiful. It's a beautiful building. So that was kind of neat to be studying that, aspect of it. Just finished a large LEED group project, total of about 450,000 square feet, 5 buildings. That was a challenge and a lot of fun. It has a 6.2 megawatt PV system on site. And so that was kind of fun to work with through all what's required to put the PV on the building. And I have some other projects. I'm helping one company prepare their sustainable design guidelines. And that's kind of fun because they want to kind of push the envelope. So we're talking about, net zero carbon, net zero energy buildings and seeing if that's possible. And these buildings are actually rather low energy use. So net zero is not as big a challenge as like the Candida building here in Atlanta was, so that's exciting. And I have my teaching, that I'm doing at Georgia Tech. In fact, this fall, I'm teaching a course in green building construction, and it's pretty much going to be a course in LEED, but it's going to have some other aspects to it as far as that. And then in the spring quarter, they call it, is I teach a course on operations and maintenance. So that's kind of fun being back in the academic world.
Yeah, I can tell you really enjoy teaching. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, plenty busy, always needing some extra help, but those are some really cool projects, Jeff, you're working on. And it's a good thing, right? We've got to have the timber, focus on embodied carbon, got to have renewables, got to keep going with LEED. So I see a good mix there. And so my next question is, well, what's next then? So what are you reading up on, or what are you excited about that might be coming a little bit down the road in this green building movement?
If it was up to me, I know it's not realistic, but I would just say we need to just stop using fossil fuel and then just see what happens. I think the ingenuity of the human race enough to be able to overcome those challenges, but that won't happen, I realize. And I think the direction that it's going in now, quite frankly, in the decarbonization of buildings, not only in their operation, but in their building, in their construction, the life cycle analysis that's going on now. I'm trying to work on one of those now. And that's also kind of it's an interesting concept, to apply. And the other reason why I went back to school is I think that the operations of the building is critically important. I think that how the buildings are operated is where the rubber hits the road. I think we were just discussing that yesterday, with a high performance building that has all the capability of doing everything for energy efficiency. It's very easy once the owner gets a hold of it, it's too complicated and everything gets reverted back to manual operations and it just sits there, but it's still considered a high performance building. And that's why I think that how we actually operate the buildings is important
100%.
moving forward. Yeah.
Right.
And getting rid of fossil fuels. I think we're kind of seeing tipping points now.
Yeah, it's going to happen. Let's speed it up. Absolutely. Yeah. So some rapid fire questions here. What would you say is your specialty or gift?
I would say being passionate about my work and being detailed and getting into especially on the work side of with clients. Once we go through the negotiation and the fee establishment, I'm all in, until it all gets done. And so that can be good and bad, by the way. But pretty much that is how I operate. I think I take great interest in my projects, and they become personal for me. So I don't see them as just a production line, activity.
Yeah, no, 100%. I love that. Jeff, do you have any good habits or routines, rituals you could share?
Boy, on the side of time management, I've kind of struggled with that to some degree. And, there's a million guides to managing your time. Do this, do that, have this little piece of paper here and a drawer here. And over the last year, I think I've kind of compiled that into a system that's usable for me. And it's difficult, with LEED projects, for example, it's not sort of like a task starts and a task ends and you're done. It's something that takes place over 6 months to 2 years or more. And over that period of time, you have certain activities and milestones and things that have to be done. And trying to put those into a to-do list, I found to be very difficult. So I think that I've finally managed to look at my full scope of work and allocate weekly and monthly blocks of time to just sort of zero in and focus on those. And that seems to be helpful for me. And I'm an early riser, and I don't have the standard ritual, but I do try to get in as much exercise as I can and eat well and try to keep a good balance between everything. I think there's no one thing. Every plan you make is going to have hiccups and changes along the way. So,
absolutely,
you're getting there.
Adapt a little bit. No, thanks for giving us a peek into your world and how to stay productive. So let's continue. Just a couple more quick questions here as we get to know each other even more. I'm a fan of a bucket list. But what are one or two things maybe on your bucket list? Maybe some adventure, some travel, maybe you want to write a book. What are a couple things on the bucket list?
Well, I've decided that my bucket list items pretty much include epic adventures. And I think you can maybe see why. Sure. But I think just before South Face, I rode a bike across the country from Seattle, Washington to Washington, D.C. When I finished the Channel Tunnel project, I took a one-way flight from London to Zurich, and the only baggage was my bike, and I rode all the way back. So things like that, I would love to start doing more often. I'd love to do the Great Divide mountain bike trail from Canada to Mexico. That's getting difficult now because of increased temperatures and having to deal with smoke all the time on that ride. So that's kind of a little discouraging. And there's a couple of rides in Europe I like. It's not all bike riding, but one thing I'd love to do is hike across the Greenland ice cap. I'd like to go see that firsthand. So most of my bucket list items are getting out there and seeing the world.
Well, an adventure. I love these expeditions, and you've already done some pretty cool ones. Not many will ever do. And you're right. You can probably thank your parents for those global journeys when you were through. It's amazing. That's right. You said you like to read. Is there a book you'd recommend to our podcast listeners?
You know, if it's a book that is based on...
It doesn't even have to be about green buildings. So just okay. a good book, whatever, one or two you'd recommend.
The last year or two, I've been reading some history books, and I find history to be amazing. It's nothing like what you took in high school, you know, and it's the book I read just a short while back was a history of pre-World War II Germany. It was actually, you know, the 7 or 8 years before World War II, what happened in Germany. And I'm reading a book now, it's actually about the Civil War, and it's all the things that happened prior to the Civil War. And it's an amazing what took place in the first half of the 1800s. Because especially, you know, with all of the attention now on the critical race theory, and the New York Times recommended, they said, these are the books you need to read if you want to learn about the Civil War. And so I was kind of interested. And, you know, for instance, just probably not in the thing, but in the early 1800s, shipping material from Europe to the United States was the same cost as shipping that same shipment 30 miles inland.
Wow.
And everybody in the country, for the most part, got everything they needed from a 20-mile radius. Food, clothing, furniture, what have you. Then, mid-1800s, coming up to the Civil War, all of the train tracks were built. And they were just massive building of train tracks. So what happened was this artisan furniture maker realized that now he can sell his furniture in New York. And then what that brought on was demand. And then the factory system came on where you could have multiple unskilled folks doing the one part of the furniture making, you see, and then it was all became shipped. And you can just see how it all happens, you know, in that scope of time. And it's similar now. So that's right now. It's kind of, I think it's very interesting to look at history now. I think it's a book, by the way, is called Battle Cry of Freedom.
Perfect. We'll put a link to that book in the podcast show notes. I love that. I didn't know that. Fun fact.
I think it's McPherson. And plus, you know, from here, and since I have offices in Charleston, we live in Charleston too. You know, when you're reading that book, you know, you're realizing that half of the prelude to this you drive by on the drive to Charleston. You know, so it's all kind of pulls it off. But I'm not like a Civil War buff, but I do think the history aspect of it is quite interesting.
It's very interesting. We'll put a link there. I love it. All right, 2 final questions as we start to come to a close. Okay. Looking back on your career, any career advice you wish you'd have known a little earlier?
You know, I would say, gosh, I should be prepared for this, I guess, but I kind of stumbled even when in preparing for it.
No, this is
I think I would say that find out what you love to do and do that. I think, you know, for me, that would be difficult because I can't be a professional adventurer, but maybe I could have, you know, but I think it's like, and then also I think, you know, when a quote from Gandhi is, you know, it really doesn't matter what you do, but just do it well. And I think that's good advice. And as far as the career advice, I would say, like, especially for someone who's just beginning in the field and maybe recently graduated from school, is to sort of understand that, you know, your next several years of work are going to be your formative years of learning your trade. You don't come out of school fully experienced in your trade. And it's only after those few years that you begin to realize that you're speaking with some authority about what you do.
Those are good.
Like I said, I got a little stuck on, what career advice.
Jeff, you're doing awesome. You just gave 3 real nuggets of wisdom there. So I'm taking notes, and I love the Gandhi quote. So no, just to everybody listening is, there are these different things that a lot of our guests have learned, sometimes learned the hard way. And it's like, gosh, I wish I would have known that a little earlier. So my closing question is, let's say there's someone listening and they're just now getting into the green building movement. Maybe it's a young professional getting in. Maybe it's someone that's had a whole other career and they're like, gosh, I want to come over here and do this work. So any words of encouragement for them?
Number one, I would say have a passion for the subject. I think that's important. In other words, it's not a 9-to-5 job. I think you have to take it home and study and see what's happening. But another, I think, important bit of advice would be, especially from a LEED scorecard perspective, is to kind of know the why behind environmental and sustainability measures, because it's not uncommon on a LEED project, someone say like, why do I need to sub-meter my water, or why do I need to, have a view to the outside? And all of those, or even energy efficiency, all of those subjects have beneath them a pile of research data. And with the LEED project, sometimes it looks like you're in the weeds and you're doing this little thing here and this little thing there and this little thing there. And sometimes even, and this is reinforced by some clients, is, what's the purpose of doing this? But what I find is the result, all those little pieces coming together in aggregate, produces a fantastic building. And then a lot of times you may find yourself having to answer tough questions. And I think understanding why there's a reason for doing this. For instance, the green power credits, which in 4.1 they don't have that really, but they do. But the purchasing the green power, some people sort of say, it's just, you have to just write a check to get your points, right? And, there's a whole big reason below that of why that's the case and why it would be important to invest in that. And I think instead of just sort of learning the mechanics of the reference guide, I think it would do anyone very well to do a little deeper dive into each one of those categories and be able to, discuss those with some authority. I think that would be very helpful to a career.
Absolutely. Now, what good encouragement, what great wisdom today. And, to all of our listeners, we'll put some links even to Jeff and his LinkedIn profile. Shoot him a message. Let him know what you thought of the interview. And I just really appreciate your time. I mean, Jeff, you're one of the originals here in green buildings in the Southeast. And just thank you for allowing us to get to know you more, your story, all those expeditions that started when you were young. And I just love the passion you still have to do this really cool work, project to project. So, man, really appreciate your time today.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate you letting me have this opportunity.
I just want to say thank you to our loyal listeners. We actually are celebrating over 1 year here on the Green Building Matters podcast. Me and the entire team were stoked and just so glad you continue to listen every Wednesday morning to a new interview with a green building professional here in this industry, or just some pro tips that we want to make sure that you are getting straight from us, straight to you. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Green Building Matters podcast. At gbes.com, our mission is to advance the green building movement through best-in-class education and encouragement. Remember, you can go to gbes.com/podcast for any notes and links that we mentioned in today's episode. And you can actually see the other episodes that have already been recorded with our amazing guests. Please tell your friends about this podcast. Tell your colleagues. And if you really enjoyed it, leave a positive review on iTunes. Thank you so much, and we'll see you on next week's episode.